and welcome to the 17th Annual Social Justice Colloquium. We're glad to see just a wonderful crowd of you here this afternoon. My name is Gerald Shank. Along with Dr. Angie Tran, we have been organizing Social Justice Colloquia since 1997, spring of 1997. And we have a whole range of different topics that we have addressed. They're always topics that link local issues of justice to global issues of justice. And they've been in economic, environmental, personal. We've covered housing issues, farmland issues. We've covered healthcare, workers' rights, labor issues. A wide range of different issues over 17 years that we've been doing this. Today, we are linking up with yesterday's business ethics panel. This is something that the business program has been doing for several years now. And I understand that was a very successful event. Dr. Tran and Dr. Fuller, who are on the panel today, were part of that yesterday. So they're going to make a connection to yesterday's business ethics panel. But as you know from your program, today's theme is corporate social responsibility. And yesterday, as I understand it, and we'll hear more from Charles Fuller and Angie Tran about this, focused more on large corporate enterprises. Today, we're going to look more at smaller corporations, as Dr. Tran will give you the acronym SMEs, small, medium, enterprises, SMEs. You'll hear that from Dr. Tran, I'm sure, a number of times. We have a great panel here, and we're really grateful to all of them for being willing to come and participate in this. We have two students, Erika Rodriguez and Shelby Rodgers. Erika Rodriguez with an organization called Students for Quality Education, and Shelby Rodgers with Everyone's Harvest. She's an environmental science major. And as I understand, Environmental Harvest ties in, also has the on-campus farmers market?
Everyone's Harvest? Yeah, we currently have the farm stand on Tuesdays from 12 to 2.
So on Tuesdays, you want to get fresh produce out on the quad. It's wonderful. So thank both of you, Erika and Shelby, for being here. We also have Maria Garcia from the University Corporation. I don't know if the students here or community people understand how the university is set up. We have sort of stateside, which is the academic side, which most of you are engaged with. We offer courses, teaching and learning, and then the corporation side, which is the University Foundation. I think Maria will tell us a little bit about what the University Corporation does. She's the Director of Operations and Administration for auxiliary corporations at California State University. Sheila Bowman is here with us from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. You're all familiar with that, I'm sure. She's Manager of Culinary and Strategic Initiatives for Monterey Bay Aquarium and for the Seafood Watch program. If you don't all have the little card with the fish that you can and cannot eat, or should and should not eat, you should make sure to get one of those, put it in your wallet, and keep it with you. Daniel Emerson is a local CEO of a business called Light and Motion Industries. It's down on Cannery Row, I believe, right? He's going to talk to us from the perspective of a CEO of an SME, a small, medium-sized enterprise. He's been with Light and Motion since 2007, and he's going to tell us about how they function and how they address issues related to corporate social responsibility. Charles Fuller is a lecturer in social and behavioral sciences here. He's a geographer, Chinese linguist. He's lived in China. He was part of the business ethics panel yesterday, and he's going to give us kind of a summary and help us to make the connection from the event yesterday. Mark Weller represents our labor unions, Unite Here, Local 483, representing hospitality workers in the Monterey Bay area. He has also taught here at CSUMB, and I don't know, you've also taught up in at UC? San Jose State. Oh, San Jose State. So he is a CSU person as well as a labor organizer. And then finally, Dr. Tran, who I've had the privilege of working with for these 17 years on the corporate, on the Social Justice Colloquium. Dr. Tran is, she won't tell you this, but I'll tell you, and then she'll tell you I exaggerate, but it's not true. She is one of the internationally recognized experts on corporate social responsibility. Other scholars in the social behavioral sciences are intensely jealous of her because people around the world like to have her come talk to them and participate with them in their research projects. So she gets paid to travel. She gets paid to go to Paris and Johannesburg and Singapore and places like that because people are interested in her expertise, particularly on this issue of corporate social responsibility. And she has done years of research, particularly on Vietnam, which is her specialty, but she's also done research on South Africa and Malaysia on corporate social responsibility. And so I think she'll tell you a little bit about the organization that she's been working with. And so Charles Fuller will give us this connection with the business ethics panel, and then Dr. Tran is going to give us an overview of the issues raised by this movement called corporate social responsibility. And then our other panelists will respond to that. They'll explain a little bit what the organizations are that they work with and how they link up with the issues raised by Dr. Tran. So I will turn it over to Charles Fuller at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Schenk. I have 5 minutes to summarize 2 hours worth of presentations. The theme of the forum yesterday, the ethics forum, was "It Ain't Easy Being Big," exploring the ethical challenges of facing one of the planet's planet's wealthiest corporations, of course, Apple. Our keynote speaker who spoke first yesterday was Rich Jaroslavsky, who's a journalist with Bloomberg News and also a regular commentator on NPR's Morning Edition. He talked about Apple, ethics, and technology, comparing Apple to Exxon, the 2 largest corporations in the world relative to market capitalization. He asked a couple of questions. Why do we love one, Apple, and dislike the other, Exxon? Especially in light of the fact that Apple has profit margins significantly higher than Exxon. The answer is that surveys show people have a favorable impression of technology companies, and we tend to have an unfavorable impression of oil companies, particularly when gas goes over $4 a gallon. Additionally, Apple products are simply cool. I don't think he said that, I said that. He distinguished the products of the 2 companies, pointing out that Exxon's products are a necessity or a commodity, whereas Apple's are a luxury. He then posed another question: are we too easy on Apple and too hard on the oil industry? He alluded to the well-published problems associated with Apple's biggest supplier in China, Foxconn. He asked, how should Apple deal with the problem? Should Apple fire the suppliers who have the most egregious labor practices and then find new, less objectionable suppliers? Or should we work with the suppliers to make improvements in the way that they do business? He then asked, is transparency a valuable end product? If an individual is transparent in their less honorable activities, does that transparency then make them adequately ethical? He concluded by saying that the discussion yesterday would focus on 4 points. Do we go easy on Apple? Should Apple be held to a higher standard? What are Apple's obligations relative to fixing their suppliers? and what are our obligations as consumers. Next, Professor Tran spoke. The title of her presentation was Corporate Social Responsibility, Facts and Fancies. She gave a brief recent history of corporate social responsibility, focusing on, for example, in 1996, the Kathy Lee Gifford story about her clothing line being made in Honduran sweatshops. The 1999 UN Global Compact, which asks companies around the world to embrace universal principles. Then in 2004, corporate social responsibility was imposed on Vietnam. And finally, she cited her own study in 2011 that revealed that corporate social responsibility statements and efforts tend to be tokenistic. She says that attention to corporate social responsibility issues in recent years have led to several new standards. For example, there's the Social Accountability International Standards 8000. There's the International Organization for Standardization's Guidelines for Social Responsibility, ISO 26000. And finally, Occupational Safety and Health Standards 18000, standards for protecting the safety, health, and welfare of people engaged in work or employment. Professor Tran cited the 2005 study of Blofeld and Freinas, Setting New Agendas, Critical Perspectives on Corporate Social Responsibility in the Developing World. She discussed the state of corporate social and environmental responsibility in small and medium enterprises in Vietnam and South Africa, emphasizing, among other things, the importance of gender issues in the CSER discourse. She pointed out that Apple's corporate CSR must include the CSER, hope you're used to the acronyms by now, of their suppliers. And she summarized some of the violations of corporate social responsibility at the Apple's Foxconn supplier facility in China, including things like some recent suicides. Her conclusions include multinational corporations generally do not reply to public outcry. People should be informed about supply chains. We should raise consciousness, take action when necessary, including exit, voice, boycott. We need to remind multinational corporations of their promises, and we should work with NGOs and civil society organizations and small and medium enterprises. The next presenter was Svein Opperman, the Managing Director of Investments of the Opperman Financial Group of Wells Fargo Advisors. He made a very poignant comment. He said the pulse of a publicly traded company, the way it is perceived by the public, is taken by the stock market. He referred to the image of Earth superimposed on the Apple logo resting on a tripod that was shown at the beginning of the presentations. He referred to the three legs of the Apple tripod: profit, planet, and people. These refer to the Apple corporate social and environmental responsibility position, that is, the importance of the company's economic health, its stewardship of the planet, and the company's commitment to both shareholders and stakeholders. He mentioned that the public's consciousness of a company puts attention on the behavior of the company. As long as we are aware of a company, that puts pressure on them. He suggested that CEOs of corporations in general also want a better planet. They're not out to ruin the planet for profit. That led to a very nice question and answer period, generous amount of time for Q&A, dialogue with the speakers. Student questions and comments were all very insightful and well considered, and students had lined up so many of them were willing to comment that Q&A time, in fact the entire symposium ended before everyone could get their questions answered. So just some quick summaries of the topics covered in Q&A. Assumptions about the motives of large corporations. Are they inherently good or not? The win-win mantra of the CSR movement, and the possibility of lose-lose scenarios. The concentration of workers in the small and medium enterprise, there's a nice link to today, but 80% of labor around the world is in small and medium enterprises. Company corporate social responsibility and transparency. The need to find a balance between doing well and doing good. The nature of capitalism. Can manufacturing ever be completely free from all forms of exploitation, both human and environmental? Since the U.S. is the biggest and richest market in the world, all countries want to export to here. Thus, the U.S. can set standards by which we would-be exporters from other countries can sell to the U.S. market. And finally, corporate social responsibility develops from the bottom up, not from the top down, unless corporate leadership has a natural corporate social responsibility proclivity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fuller. I think my presentation is on Prezi, and I need to find some help. Martin, if you could please come up and help me get it out. But I would like to just first start by thanking you all for being here and participating with us when outside is so beautiful, and you were here. Thank you very much for being so nice to see. It's very nice to see a big crowded room. It's wonderful. My second big thanks, goes to Lily, who's in the back there, and Heather, who helped us put this event together. Without them, it would happen. So I thank you for fantastic help from our wonderful, wonderful staff in SPGS. Thirdly, our wonderful, wonderful students, who without them, it won't happen either. So thank you. We really appreciate their help. And finally, thank our panelists, who are so accommodating and responding to us even with very short-term notice, and our deep gratitude. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you. So, I need to log in very quickly here. Oops. Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe Martin go and you log on, then it's in the cloud. And so,
I got it.
Yeah. So I think Dr. Fuller provided a fantastic overview of yesterday's event, and he kind of helped me condense some of the slides here. How many of you were there yesterday? Okay. Okay. So I apologize if you may hear something similar from yesterday, but I tried to condense, and I tried to move forward from the comments from yesterday, so make it very dynamic. Second thing comes to my mind. How many faculty were here in the room? Thank you very much for participating. So the photo has something to be said here. The title says Corporate Social Responsibility, Facts and Fancies. This is the photo that we took as part of our one-year-long study that Dr. Shank mentioned earlier, surveying 60 companies in Vietnam, SMEs. Hopefully you remember that acronym by now. This is one of the 60 companies that we interviewed. We interviewed 3 sectors: hotel, textile garment, and food processing. Those are the factories that manufacture and provide service. So this is one of those medium-sized hotels that we interviewed, and this is the road leading to that hotel. I think this photo is symbolic of the whole concept of CSR. We are on a journey towards some nice, noble intention of this concept, but what are the realities on the ground? So hence the fancies part. So I'm going to move forward. I'm sorry, we are experimenting with Prezi this time, so I just push next. I need Martin's help again here to move to the next one. The sequence of the event here would be that I will first provide a very brief historical context. Dr. Fuller had mentioned the lineup, the chronology of the event. CSR is not a new concept. It was introduced 17 years ago. It actually started in the US. And how many of you remember of the whole Kathy Lee Gifford's debacle? And that gave rise to this whole initiative. So the point I want to make in this slide is that corporate will respond if there was public outcry. There was public outcry due to the controversy that was brought to limelight by New York Times articles. So the media broke it out to our consciousness. The ethical consumers reacted. Public outcry led to investigation, led to the MNC's response to that by introducing the whole CSR movement or initiative, if you will. Then it got spread to the global world, at the international scene, where Kofi Annan, the then General Secretary, invited MNCs to adopt these ILO, International Labour Organization, conventions voluntarily. Voluntarily. So these are not binding. These codes of conduct are not binding. And corporations are basically then develop the so-called third-party monitoring companies. So you have Fair Labor Association is one of the many NGO, international NGOs that respond to the need to provide monitoring and pushing for the remediation of violations. So when you talk about CSR, the focus can be in different directions. But in this panel, we focus on the issue of labor standards. Labor standards basically established based on ILO conventions. And also, you see that the development of codes of conduct, basically two types of codes of conduct. One is created by MNCs themselves. Over thousands of codes of conduct created by MNCs. Secondly, codes of conduct created by these third-party monitoring companies that I mentioned earlier. FLA is one, which is affiliating with Apple. And CSI, which is corporate social, SAI, Social Accountability International, which developed SA 8000 that Dr. Fuller mentioned earlier. So as you can tell, I'm critical of this concept. That was the finding in my 2011 study. In that study, I looked at big companies. I looked at MNCs also. What I found is that lip service. More lip service, more style than substance. I didn't have resources to engage in this, really bigger scope of study. And we collaborated with a colleague in South Africa, Cape Town in particular, and another colleague in Denmark, and engaging in this kind of comparative study between 60 companies in Vietnam and 58 companies in South Africa to look at SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises. Why SMEs? SMEs because that's where the majority of the workforce are being hired. Over 80% of most countries' workforce are hired by small companies, small and medium-sized companies, not by MNCs. Most likely MNCs subcontract, they don't produce, they buy. They buy stuff from their suppliers and they sell to us in the retail stores. So that's the big picture. We use this critical definition by these two authors to say that the responsibilities of companies should not just limiting within the internal of the company, but should be outside of the company and contextualized in the political, economic, social, historical context of each country. So our framework is broad, and we try to bring in all stakeholders, not just within the company, but outside of the company, and especially the relationship between business and the broader societies. Oops, wrong way. Yeah, next one. Okay, so I'm not gonna, that's why we're just saying that if you look at this framework that we're using here, I bet you that you can see yourself playing more than one role. Okay, so the inner rectangular is basically within the firm, and the bigger rectangle is outside of the firm, and the surrounding and this context. You can see yourself as the clients or customers, for this matter, and you can see yourself potentially a resource. Well, resource, I mean, this is kind of business language. Could be labor, you could be an employee, you could be a worker. So you can see yourself playing a role from the inside, and you can see yourself outside, and perhaps you can even be a shareholder. So people playing multiple roles in this big scheme of things, and our point is to bring everyone to the table. Okay, so our study focused on both inside and outside and the relationship, and we're focusing on the gaps in the literature. The literature thus far focusing on big companies. Okay, I think we'll move to the next one. Big companies, formal forms of CSR, meaning compliance with formal codes of conduct, and from the global north, from developed countries only. So we fill in and basically gender blind, okay, saying that male, female workers are being impacted the same. We said, no. That we contribute to the existing literature by saying that SM, the size matters. Small, medium-sized companies are very important and need to be brought to the table. So size matters, context matters. You look at Vietnam, socialist country, and South Africa, democratic country, context matters. Gender matters. Gender differences matter because what we found is that the impacts on female workers are very different from the impacts on male workers. And finally, informal practices are very important. If you're looking from the SME perspectives, you will see that they don't have the resources to be complied in codes of conduct. It's very expensive to be complied in, the SA 8000 or ISO 24000 now, and paying the money to the monitoring companies to come and monitor their factories. So therefore, it is a very expensive proposition for SMEs to do. What do they do instead? They do it the ground up. Informal practices of being kind to the workers, being kind to the environment, being kind to the communities, by giving loans to workers, by giving them time off, by paying attention to their needs, flexibility, so on and so forth. So we're paying attention to informal practices. How much time do we have? Do I have? Dr. Sheng, timekeeper? 5 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to be very brief here. The point to be made here is that these are the stakeholders, and I try to apply our broad framework to the case of Apple. Okay. This is the giant. So Apple, thanks to the outcry of the public coming to our consciousness last year, if you recall, a spate of suicides happening in China, Shenzhen, manufacturing province in Vietnam, millions and millions of workers there. And there were suicide, cases of suicides and injured because, how many of you own an Apple product in this room, may I ask? I am certainly a minority. I don't. I don't. I do that on purpose. On principle. I just don't own one. But the thing, why I'm asking that, you know the flat, the smooth surface of the case of your iPad? It's smooth because workers over there in China use aluminum dust to solder them. And fires happened in factories where aluminum dust is all over the factory, and cases of fire happened before, repeatedly. So workers got killed and injured due to those aluminum dust caused fire. So the point I want to make here is that due to those expose of the violations, Apple affiliated with FLA, okay, beginning of 2012. Basically hired FLA to come into the suppliers and monitor these suppliers. Apple also put out a supplier list. Okay? The 2013 supplier list has 200 big corporations supplying products for Apple. Apple don't produce, Apple subcontract, okay? Buy products from these suppliers in far-flung countries and sell to us. Now, we've heard of Foxconn in Shenzhen, China. We think that, oh, maybe they're just being manufactured in China. No, they're being manufactured in many, many parts of the world. If you look at, you can Google it and look at the supplier list of Apple to see that it's not just in China. 199 other corporations in other countries. And the point I want to make here is that you need to go below the supplier level, the sub-supplier level, or the subcontractor, which happens most likely owned and operated by local managers. Sometimes medium-sized, sometimes even big-sized, large companies. That level, I argue, are invisible. Those sub-suppliers, subcontractors, are often not in the radar of FLA or other monitoring companies, and violations happening there. After the spate of suicides and also injuries happening in China, Chinese companies, Foxconn in particular, began to outsourcing to, you guess what, to where? Close to China. It's going south. Vietnam. And beginning 2012, I look at Vietnamese newspapers, there are articles about Chinese companies, Foxconn in particular, outsourcing to Vietnam. And those companies are now invisible in the whole scheme of things, reporting the so-called social reporting scheme of Apple. Okay, and also one more thing, Chinese workers, right after the spate of those accidents happening, went on strike. Those news we don't hear. I got to my Vietnamese sources and I found titles of thousands of Chinese workers went on strike in 2012 after these spates of suicides and accidents. The Chinese and the Vietnamese government censored the news, so then we don't know the details, but at least we know that it happened. So, I think I said all this, and we move forward. Oh, The one juxtaposition of Apple market cap figure with workers' monthly wage is staggering. At this point, Apple market capitalization, basically the worth of their stocks, over 400 billion US dollars. Over 400 billion US dollars. Compared to less than 400 US dollars that a Chinese worker makes a month. You see? That's a staggering difference there. Okay, let's move on. Now, what I found, as I mentioned, the weakness in this whole scheme of things, CSR, is in the monitoring. If you think that Apple is good in terms of being transparent to us, yes, well, they're not doing it voluntarily, they're doing it because they're forced to. They're forced to do that because of our pressure. But that's not enough. Because monitoring, they use FLA to monitor. If you look at FLA report on these 3 existing companies, Chinese companies that are in the know, that are already on the public, then you know their names. But in the accountability report,